and just sort of start talking about Holland a little bit, who
Mhm.
I thought had a good showing at the combine this week. Measured 6'6.5" without shoes, wingspan just under 6'11", standing reach 8 feet 8 inches. I believe that he was weighed in at 206 pounds. That may have been prior to the combine. Um, Forward wing measured pretty well, I think, given the positional archetype for him this week in Chicago at the combine, and athletically, just in my opinion, one of the better athletes in this draft class, especially if you're going to factor in like the wing size that he brings. But impressive leaper who can glide, can really hang in the air. You see it with some of those transition grab and go finishes, or when he's able to turn the corner and get downhill, he can really take off and cover ground. Has the ability to hang, make midair adjustments, still finishes with touch, when he's driving
Mhm.
downhill, slashing, dealing with contact. I think there were times this season he really showed, especially later in the year, with G League Ignite, he showed sort of some strength finishing too that I think is sort of interesting. He can drive it with either hand, good fluidity with his movement. I thought the pacing got a lot better with his downhill drives, sort of started to slow down a little bit. And when he's able to slow things down and play with a little bit of craft and then pounce in those moments where, elite high end athleticism is called for, it looks really good at times. And I just, in general, think his body control is quite good. So there's a couple things I'd like to touch on with Holland, but just in terms of how things went at the combine this week, I guess there really wasn't much to it other than him doing some drills and getting measured. And just overall, where are you with Holland in terms of his measurables and his athleticism? And then maybe we can get into some of the other sort of like more distinguished parts of his game.
Yeah, for part of like basically the early parts of the draft, or the people who are considered to be early on into the draft, I think he has some of the best athleticism. To your point, maybe probably the best, and maybe the best in the draft. I can't really say that for sure off the top of my head, but it's definitely top three at least. And I like the way he plays in transition, which I think no matter the last two coaches we've been through, they've both kind of pushed transition and just making the most of those transition opportunities. So of course he fits in well with that. I don't think Charles Lee would change that too much. What coach would, being able to make the most of your transition opportunities, but he's really good in transition. I think he is a capable passer also,
Mhm.
whether that's half court or in transition. I do want to say that his decision making is a little off, but I mean, I feel like almost any young talented guard that has confidence is just going to just make bad decisions sometimes because they just believe so much in their ability. Don't really think anything of that. And I think just some good coaching, having some good players around them, which I think that's something we should probably mention with G League Ignite, is that the talent around them was good individually. It just wasn't.
It was
It
a
just
mess
didn't
this
click.
year. It was a mess
It,
this year.
it
It
was a
was a
man,
mess.
and that's why they chose this year to be like, all right, no more. It was a
That
lot
was
of talent.
that was surprising to me too. I actually think
Yeah.
they, without knowing sort of like the financial components of things, like I thought Ignite was working. Like it is interesting to, I guess, have read some of the stories and
Mhm.
more information from them. But I was a little surprised that after only 4 seasons, with plenty of successful cases,
I was just about to
that,
say it seemed like it was working. Jonathan
yeah,
Kaminga,
Jalen
Jalen
Green,
Green. So you
Dyson
were getting people.
Daniels,
Yeah,
yeah,
you were getting a lot of people in there, and I don't. I think you look at all of them, and you're pretty. If you're the team that drafted them, you're pretty happy with what you got. So, yeah, I'm surprised too. But this year it just seemed real stacked. It seemed like there was a lot of talent on there. When you watched it on the court, it was just like, what's going on? This guy's supposed to be this. This guy's supposed to be that. But I mean, Ron Holland, I believe he made the most of what he could. I mean, he did have that injury, but it didn't decide to come back, which after you kind of did what he did in Ignite, there was really nothing left for him to do. So I really wouldn't put that against him because we might get into somebody later who I actually do have injury concerns for, but Ron Holland's not one of them.
Mhm.
But yeah, I really like his game. I really wish I could see him. His shot looks good in the mid range. Sometimes he's like willing to take it. It's just obviously it doesn't fall. But if you're willing to take it at this young age, especially with the lack of spacing around him, I'm okay with that. So I wouldn't consider him as just someone who could only finish around the rim, which he finished around the rim in so many different ways. That's a very polished. Almost, I wouldn't say polished, but it is a very good skill set of his, considering.
Yeah.
And one thing I've said in the past is these players are not the same, but I do feel like I see a lot of Scoot Henderson as far as the age and being able to kind of physically keep up with these. Most of the time you're playing grown men. So I feel like I really like that from him because he's a relatively young player. So being able to physically kind of just be lock and step with these other guys, 26-year-olds, you're playing 25-year-old, 24. I'm pretty happy with that as well. So I wouldn't be considered or worried that, how would that transition to the NBA? Because that's one thing you're always going to worry about with guys who rely on physicality and athleticism is, can it translate? I don't see why not, honestly.
Yeah, I think a guy like Holland, you mentioned he's very young. And this is a guy who, saw his fair not, saw his draft status slip a little bit, even in what is sort of deemed to be a week cycle. By no means do I think this guy is, as Ron Holland is like an, is he going to come in and do Brandon Miller things and just instantly turn into a starter and a guy that needs to be on the floor, at the end of games, that type of stuff. It's going to take some time. He needs to land in a good situation with a place that's going to allow him to sort of like grow up, get stronger, get more reps on the basketball. Because again, the handle is along with the jump shot is sort of like an area of concern for him. But the athleticism is pretty special. The lower body strength, the fluidity, and he can get better with a lot of that stuff. So I'm pretty in on Holland, and again, I think the fact that you see him in some mocks get landing around like 9 or 10, that to me is just to me that's too low for a guy
Yeah, for
with
sure.
this size at that position with the upside that he possesses. It to me it's just it's a little something's missing there for me at least.
Especially when you see who's being chose before him. It's
Mhm.
like, it's just, I don't believe it. I don't believe
Yeah.
it.
And again, there are definitely some concerns with the handle, the limitations there. If you watch him play a full game, you're going to see it on display. Sometimes for me, just my own thing was it felt like he would almost get stuck in between changing speeds or sort of like altering moves or combinations, just like unclear with what he wants to do with the ball. So you'll see him like go downhill. He's got a guy one-on-one in space, and then it's like the almost sort of similar to a player who takes off and they can't decide whether they want to dunk or lay the ball up in the air. But instead for him, it's, does he want to hit a crossover? Is it going to be an inside out? Does he want to just try to like tuck it in and just go to his strong hand? And guys can poke it and knock the ball out. So the space creation, the downhill drives, like they can look a little tricky at times, just like the upper body maybe not quite as fluid in those moments as you might like. But I like his first step. Obviously he's got good length. I think he's got some craft, and at times he can get skinny and get into gaps with speed and pacing. I feel like he needs to really use that Euro gather to do it though, as opposed to just like springing through with a live dribble.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like at times, like the Euro move is something that he can be like a little reliant on to sort of like carve out that space in the final third for finishes and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, Darian, how do you feel about Holland and from like a self creation standpoint on offense, whether that's open floor or
Mhm.
in the half court?
I agree. To your point, I do believe he struggles a little bit, and I'm glad that you mentioned about him kind of being confused in between moves because I know now that you're saying it, I noticed it. I just didn't have the words to kind of describe it, but I did realize that it was just a little hesitation. I couldn't tell like is that hesitation part of his like move set or is it like him getting stuck. I never thought that it could possibly be him getting stuck, but now that you kind of put in words to it, I see it. But in space he's one of the better guys in this class. Even though it's not to quite where you want it to be, but when you think about where it can be, when you see the potential, I think that's what's really going to sell us and the Hornets and really whoever ends up drafting him on him is because it's all there. I think everything you want in a wing, he has it. He's shown that he can do it. It's just how often can he do it? How reliable is it? It's not going to be one of those situations where you're drafted him and saying, I haven't seen this part of his game. Like if we want to use players on our own roster, like Brandon Miller, where last year people were concerned about his mid range, but that was just because Alabama doesn't take mid range shots. That's their thing. They either get to the hole or they shoot threes. With Ron Holland, whether you're pleased with whatever he ends up doing, whether you're pleased with it or not, you've seen it. You've seen to know, can he do it? Can he not do it? Is he comfortable doing it? Those are the things that I don't think you can really walk away from his tape and kind of wonder like, oh, well, what about this part of his game? I think he leaves it all on the floor. I really like his competitive spirit, which is something that we have to mention specifically for this team, because we know at times when the team gets down, it's been really difficult for them to kind of come back up outside of just pure talent. Sometimes their talent is what gets them over the edge, but a lot of times Grant Williams and Brandon Miller, of course, have helped with that, but it's always going to be nice to add more players like that. I think we saw Jeff Peterson kind of mention that as well. So not to go off the beaten path about his space creation or his creation in space, but yeah, I think he's just an overall solid talent. And I really like what I see from him. I really do.
Yeah.
And then I think he has defensive upside as well.
For sure, and I'd like to flip over to defense in a second here. Obviously, the big knock with Holland is going to be right now is the jump shot, right? I think the handle is in probably the decision making as well. Another sort of like limitation he has with the basketball. We were sort of touching on that, but I think in terms of not just his handle, but decision making as a passer, a playmaker for others, like he does need some work there, or just like more reps to see if he can turn the corner there. And then there's the jump shot, and Holland is one of those guys that I'm pretty sure if Spencer were on this episode of the pod with us, and I don't know how much Holland scouting he's done, but one of the things Spencer would say is when this guy misses, he misses badly. Like some of the catch and shoot 3-point attempts, they look rushed. He lacks confidence. Even in moments when he's shooting off the catch in space. And look, if there was anything that really did damage to his stock over the last 10 to 12 months, it was probably this more than anything else. Just going off stats provided by the NBA and the G League's statistical pages, this is combined over, I believe, 29 games this season with the G League regular season and showcase. Holland, 23 of 94 from downtown. It's a little under 25%. It's not good. I mean, that's obviously that's not going to work, but there's a lot of wing prospects, and including a couple today we're going to talk about that all have, I think, big question marks next to the jump shot, right? So especially from that deep. So a guy like Holland, I'm willing to bank on the athleticism, the defensive upside, and sort of just hope that you can get the jumper to a better place. And I think in terms of the shot that I think there's some low hanging fruit too, which one, he's young, he's going to get better. He's just going to end up shooting. I'm sure between now and February, it's been 3.5 months or whatever. I'm sure he's taken a ton of shots, right? Hopefully this guy's taking 1,000 threes per day, but clean up the base on his jumper, clean up the release. That's stuff that you just grab. That's low hanging fruit. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, if that boosts him from being a mid 20s, high 20s%, spot up 3-point shooter to low 30s, then, you're maybe not cooking with gas, but the needle's pointed in the right direction, and there's so much other stuff to like. You talked about the competitive nature. We'll get to the defense in a second. But yeah, I just think once if you can clean some of that stuff up and continue to develop, I think there's a world where the 3-point shot finds water, and then everything else really gets to sing. The athleticism, the defense, the competitive nature, and isn't a wing that can slash and play defense and has athleticism, isn't that exactly what the Hornets are looking to pair with Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball? That to me he seems like a really nice fit actually for them.
Yeah, I think
an optimized version of him, you know what I mean?
Right. And I think Brandon Miller helps him out a lot. I can't think of all the teams in the order right now, so forgive me, but just thinking what's a good wing for him to be paired with that's not obviously a superstar. Brandon Miller, as close to the perfect fit you can get, because a lot of things he doesn't do well, Brandon Miller does well.
Yep.
And I'm not saying Brandon, and things that Brandon Miller may not be his top skill, Ron Holland does extremely well. And with his shot, he takes it. I mean, it's not good, but he knows when to take it. If the defense is sagging off, he's going to take it. If he
Yep.
can create a little bit of space, he's going to take it. So I rather him kind of struggle and get that low hanging fruit, as you mentioned, than to
Yep.
be scared, than to
Yep.
be in a corner and pass it up when you're wide open. So to your point.
And again, we're gonna talk about a few other guys, including Steph Castle from UConn later,
Mhm.
and I'm probably gonna mirror a lot of the things you just said about Holland later when we talk about Castle. Last thing I would touch on with Holland, just offensively, again, not a super accurate passer always. Sometimes he throws kind of like a little erratic at times, but I like his hit aheads in transition. He looks to play with pace, slash and kick out for threes. Like there's some like natural synergy, I think, with a guy like LaMelo. And I think another area where his feel for the game shows up is just when he's making like he can do like the extra pass, swing stuff to help build advantage in the half court. So I don't know. I kind of like some of his maybe like open floor or sort of like advantage build passing opportunities. But yeah, let's go ahead and switch it over to team defense. To me, this is the first time I saw Holland play a full game was the Hoop Summit last year up in Portland when he was playing with Team USA. I'd seen clips from his prep and AAU days. A lot of those centered on the defense. And when I saw him play up in Portland, that was the other thing that popped out to me. I like his feel a lot as a backside low man help defender, reactive, covers ground, makes plays at the rim. When the Ignite had that 2-game exhibition series to start the season against Perth, so you got to see Alex Sarr versus Ron Holland. He had there was one time Alex Sarr caught a pass on the dive going downhill to the rim. Holland's low man in the weak side, right corner. He rotates over and blocks, a taller Sarr at the rim. It was one of probably the more impressive, bits of like weak side rim protection I saw from a prospect in the 2024 draft cycle. It happened almost, close to a year ago, last September. But I just like his communication, switching around, talking. You can see him communicating switches and switchbacks behind the action of the play. And he has the ability with his athleticism, his length, and just his reaction times to be an event creator on defense, whether that's, random double teams, that's digging down into the post, that's weak side rim protection. He can kind of do some special stuff, and he's got the good size at the wing and the athleticism to make like splash plays on that side of the floor. So where are you with Holland's defense, either in terms of sort of this like, team defense component, or if you want to touch on his, point of attack or on ball defense, by all means, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, just to really kind of talk about his own ball defense really quick. I like it. He just seems like an active defender. He seems like a guy that, I'll say this: his offense. If his offense is not hitting, you can expect him to show up on defense. Now, is he some just amazing defensive stopper? No, at least not yet. But he is someone who is going to play the passing lanes, who is going to, if we move back to off ball and team defense, he is going to guard that man in the corner, but he's also looking at the paint. He's not just going to turn his back to the paint and be like, oh, they'll figure it out in the pick and roll. No, he'll go over and help. And he's obviously not afraid to guard taller players. And that sometimes that's in ISO, sometimes that is in, going up with them at the rim. So I think that goes to his competitive spirit. We hear NBA players talk about it all the time, how defense is like 50, the percentage has changed, but it's like 50% just competitive nature, or 50% effort.
Mhm.
And I think he has that. I think he has it. He wants to go out there and make an impact on defense. I think that there's maybe other players if you might look at and say, okay, they may be smarter defenders, but when you talk about a guy that is physically going to go out there and just play basketball, and part of that is playing defense, he's one of those guys where if you can clean up his defense, he really can become this pretty good defender, maybe one of the best defenders on our team, at least as our team stands right now.
So it looks like we both come out to being pretty positive on Holland. Real
Mhm,
quickly before we flip over to his teammate and I let you introduce our next prospect,
mhm,
would you be happy with Holland as the sixth pick? Would he be your first guy? If I know it's tough because it sort of
mhm.
depends on who falls, but like is he well, I guess 1 to 10, 10 being high, what would your confidence level be with a Holland pick at 6 for Charlotte?
I would say 8, 9. It'll be pretty high because
Same.
I guess not to give it away if we do later episodes, but I have this tier of guys who just in this draft class. It's just a matter of where I would take them or if I'm comfortable taking them. And he is on that tier with two other guys who we're going to talk about today are on this tier where individually between them, I don't really feel anything. So if we just get any of those three guys, I'm perfectly A-okay with.
That's actually
But I
one of
can't differentiate them in the tier itself.
that's actually one of the things, like, one of the reasons why I, like, feel reasonably confident about where Charlotte is in this draft. One, it helps that they've got, like, a direction. They've sort of, like, settled on the coaching staff, the front office. They've got some good young players in-house already, so it's like the cupboard's not bare. They've got plus picks coming down the line, which is exciting too. So I like how they have all of that stuff in place, and so it sort of just feels like, well, if there's no game changer available, that in the middle of the lottery, we'll just go out and get like a starter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think they're gonna have a couple of options to do it. Holland to me feels like one of the guys who could be available in this range that maybe does have like a ticket to actually being like more than a starter, like a
Mhm.
plus starter or a star level type player.